Salt water stung on Emmanuel's chapped lips. The sun hung high in the sky, and he could feel the danger lurking in the waters beneath the unsteady beams of his raft. A slight fear swirled low in his guts. If he focused on it, he could feel how it swirled in the same pattern as the shadows in the water. His tongue felt like a cork, dry and rough. He wondered if he could ever get it unstuck from the roof of his mouth. His vision blurred, but with nothing but the sea surrounding him, he felt like that didn't matter anymore, anyway. Drinking the salty ocean water was becoming increasingly inviting. Slowly, he gripped the edge of the raft and leaned his head over the edge. Just as he was about to touch his mouth to the waves, he saw something. An unfamiliar face that decidedly wasn't his own reflection stared back at him. He shrieked and toppled backwards, the beams of the raft sharply digging into his back. "What on the seven seas?" he gasped, trying to calm his erratic breath. He watched in horror as long, slender fingers wrapped around the edge of the raft. Slowly, dark hair and dark eyes rose from the water, and two arms came to rest upon the edge of Emmanuel's makeshift float. "Hi there," the girl spoke. Her voice sounded like shells rolling in the tide. Emmanuel just stared. "No need to be afraid," she smiled, giving him doe eyes. "I was just going out for a swim." Droplets of water shimmered like rhinestones on her brown skin, and she laughed like chimes in the wind. Emmanuel used all his strength to separate his tongue from his palate so he could speak. "What do you mean, a swim? There's no land around for as far as the eye can see." "Don't you worry about that, silly," she smiled, a long, slender finger coming up to poke in the direction of Emmanuel's nose. He recoiled, even though she couldn't nearly reach him. "Your own situation seems to be much more dire," she sighed. The deep intake of air pushed her chest against the beams, and Emmanuel involuntarily felt his gaze fall upon the swell of her breasts that peaked above the raft's edge. A droplet of water traveled from the tendons of her neck down to her cleavage, and Emmanuel felt how his tongue once again fused with his palate. His eyes quickly snapped back up to the girl's face, but her features seemed to have darkened. "Let me sing you a song," she said, and Emmanuel heard the unspoken command. Her voice sounded like the silence before a storm, hauntingly peaceful, and the more she sang, the more her skin seemed to glow, but her eyes darkened. Emmanuel felt his heart speed up as something pulled in his guts. A mix of awe and fear swirled in his chest when their eyes locked. She held his gaze, but the longer it lasted, the more visibly upset she got. "Why don't you come here?" she breathed, almost inaudibly. Emmanuel heard it anyway, and he huffed. "Listen, I know it doesn't show by the looks of this dire situation, but I'm not stupid." She looked at him quizzically. "You're not out for a swim," he scoffed. "I know what you are. I know my days are counted on this raft, but I'm not going to end up as fish food." She growled at his disdainful tone, and he could see sharp fangs raise in the back of her mouth. He was so right. She was a siren. Beautiful, but deadly, too. "It doesn't matter what you know," she growled. "Men like you cannot ever resist." "You haven't ever met a man like me," Emmanuel grinned. "I've met one man, I've met all," the siren shrugged. "Regardless of country or allegiance, you're all the same." Her slender finger pointed accusingly. Emmanuel laughed at that, loudly and abrasive. "Well, it's not that I don't agree," he said. "But let me share a secret with you." He couldn't make out the facial expressions of the creature in front of him as he undid the buttons of his shirt. Slowly, the swaths of cotton wrapped tightly around his chest were revealed. He then proceeded to reach into his pants and took out a bunched-up wad of fabric. "I told you, you haven't ever met a man like me." The siren's eyes were wide. "You are no man at all," she exclaimed, almost in childlike wonder and surprise. "I'm who I want to be," Emmanuel retorted. "The captain of my own ship, free on the high seas," he exclaimed, gesturing wildly. The siren let out a surprised, loud laugh at that. It sounded like droplets of water clattering onto solid rocks. "I think the sun's got to your head," she said. Emmanuel shrugged. "Yeah, it isn't much," he admitted. "But I'd rather go out on grand illusions than feel miserable in my final hours. I'm on the seas, where I want to be." The siren cocked her head. "You intrigue me," she sing-songed. "You build your life around illusion. You're human, but you're just like me." "I suppose you could make that comparison," Emmanuel pondered, before breaking out in a raspy cough, his throat too dry to speak. "You need water," she observed. Emmanuel nodded slightly, his eyes closed. "Make me cry," the siren stated. "What?" "Make me cry," she repeated. "My tears will heal you." "Why would you gift your tears to me?" Emmanuel asked, shocked. "You can gift me your name in return. I have never in all my years met a human like you. Please, allow me to hold on to you." "I go by Emmanuel, but my given name is Emma." "Emma?" The way the siren said it sounded like a sunrise. "Why have you built this life of illusion, Emma?" the siren asked, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "For Emmanuel gets to live a life on the oceans, and they would not have allowed Emma to even leave her house," the sailor confided. He could see the siren's eyes search his face, but he couldn't figure out what she was looking for. "Make me cry, Emma." "Emmanuel," the siren commanded. Emma pushed up and sat straighter. Looking the sirens into her eyes, he began to sing a soft song reminiscent of the early days when he could still sit inside with his parents and could hear the sailors out on the dock singing songs of love and glory. He saw how the eyes of the siren started to glisten, and before he could register what was happening, the siren pushed herself out of the water and upon the raft. The water flowed past her chest onto her golden fins, but Emmanuel didn't have the time to contemplate this, for the soft wet lips of the siren pressed against his. He felt the wet of her tears as they flowed down her cheeks. They made his own face glow, and he felt all the fatigue leave him, his lips unchapped and his skin refreshed. Her long, slender hands came up to cup his face, his ears encapsulated between her fingers. "Emmanuel," she spoke when they broke apart, "do not let the seas take you now, for you do not just have a siren's tears, you have a siren's heart." With those words, she let go of him and made to disappear into the dark waters below. Emmanuel gripped her arm before she jumped. "Wait," he called out. "Will I see you again?" "You will see me when the time is right, my love," the siren replied. Untangling from his hand, she pressed a kiss to the back of it before disappearing into the depths below. Exhausted and confused, Emmanuel dropped onto his back, staring up at the skies above. When Emmanuel came to, he felt the surge lap at his feet. The soft sand was clinging to his bare calves and underarms, and in the distance he could hear the sounds of a port. When he made to sit up, something dug into his chest uncomfortably. A small bottle was lodged between the swatches on his chest, and the clear liquid in it had an iridescent sparkle to it. Emmanuel immediately understood. Her tears. He stared out past the waves that lapped at his feet. She'd given him way more than he could bargain for, and he wondered if he'd ever see her again. His rumbling stomach made him aware of how his entire body ached to be nurtured. So he slowly stood up and made his way to the port town. There was always talk about the odd Captain Emmanuel, how he would rise before all others and would seemingly stare into the dark water as if he was trying to spot the bottom. If you were to wait past sundown, sometimes you could hear him sing an old sailor's song to the waves, always serenading the sea, that man, always waiting for the tide to take him. Despite this, positions on Emmanuel's ship were coveted. It was rumored that under his command you'd never see any storms, never had to fear that the ocean would one day rise up and swallow you whole. It was as if Emmanuel loved the seas, and the seas loved him back. Maybe that's why his second in command was not surprised when he saw his beloved captain tumble overboard on one silent morning, the dusty pink of sunrise barely touching the sky, the day not yet alive. He heard the splash before it registered what he saw, and in the distance he could faintly hear an old sailor's song, a siren's call.